series definitely had a large presence on the Game Boy Advance library. You can even argue that the Game Boy Advance era was one of the most crucial periods in Fire Emblem's history overall. Spanning 3 games, each of them provided something new, whether it be timeless characters or an introduction to everywhere outside of Japan. Now personally, I love all of the games to come out of Fire Emblem's Game Boy era, but my favorite game out of the 3 is definitely the Sacred Stones, the 8th game overall in the franchise. Not only is it my favorite GBA Fire Emblem, it's one of my favorite Fire Emblem games ever. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and gold knights, welcome to History of the Emblem, Sacred Stones. Development for Fire Emblem 8 began at the same time developers were making Path of Radiance on the GameCube. According to some staff, production on Sacred Stones began quite unexpectedly. The team had already started on Path of Radiance, so they definitely weren't expecting to make another Fire Emblem game or another game for the Game Boy Advance. Due to the fact that these 2 games required a large amount of effort, a freelance team was brought into Intelligent Systems, some of which included former members of Capcom. The art for Sacred Stones was done by Sachiko Wada, who also acted as one of the game's directors. This was her first time having a hand in the direction for the Fire Emblem series, which may have been a result of staff being minimal. Staff being minimal was not a hindrance for the Sacred Stones group, however. Unlike the Path of Radiance team, who had to build a game from the ground up, the Fire Emblem 8 team had the previous Game Boy Advance titles to work with, and it seems that they quite literally used the previous Game Boy Advance titles. It seems that Sacred Stones was built using a ROM with Blazing Blade, as a prototype of the game shows that most of the previously mentioned titles' assets, from the title screen, the map tiles, and even all of the music, are still intact. The localization of Sacred Stones is definitely not as big of a story as Blazing Blade, but there are still some interesting tidbits to share. For example, between the 2 releases, some characters receive boosted growth rates, possibly to make the game somewhat easier. But that's just all the standard and boring stuff that came out of the localization of Sacred Stones. What about something more interesting? Well, for starters, it's a common joke theory between fans that the 2 main characters, Aphram and Erica, who are siblings, are in an incestuous relationship. This theory mostly stems from their C support, which includes Aphram saying the line, "You looked a little upset. I thought I would stroke your face like I used to." This nature is obviously a little strange for siblings, but in the Japanese version, this strangeness doesn't exist. Aphram says this to Erica, "Well, you just look depressed, so I thought I'd pet your head like I used to," which is much more appropriate for an older brother to do. This mistake may have happened due to the fact that the Japanese characters for face and head are very similar. Another misconception that fans have about the Japanese version of Sacred Stones involves Aphram and Erica once more, this time their paired ending. Many fans claim that the 2 get married in their paired ending in the Japanese version, and it was changed in the localization to be more appropriate. However, this is untrue. The Japanese ending is almost identical to their localized ending, with no traces of incest to be found. The influences from Fire Emblem's past and Sacred Stones are most strongly felt in the world map. The manner in which the player can move the main lord around the map from destination to destination is a callback to Fire Emblem Gaiden on the NES. Fire Emblem Gaiden was also unique in that it included enemies that were monsters in addition to the humans, and Sacred Stone followed in those lines as well. Skills also returned from Thracia 776, although not quite in the form that they appeared in that game. There are only 9 skills in Sacred Stones to match Thracia's 16 skills, and the skills in Sacred Stones are not specific to character. Sacred Stones continues a Fire Emblem tradition of including character archetypes, which are different characters that appear throughout the series that meet a certain criteria, whether it be similar stats or character presentation. Notable archetypes in Fire Emblem 8 include the Oifi archetype with Seth, the Cain and Abel archetype with Ford and Kyle, and the Camus archetype with Selena. As well as taking influence from the series, Sacred Stones had influence on the series as well. In Fire Emblem Awakening, players may upgrade their units into higher classes, like in any other Fire Emblem game, but they have 2 choices, which was introduced in Sacred Stones. Fire Emblem Awakening also brings back the world map and the manner in which Sacred Stones handled skills. And on a slightly more humorous note, Due to the fact that some fans found incestuous undertones in Ephraim and Erica's relationship, Intelligent Systems finally put an end to the rumor in Fire Emblem Heroes, the game for mobile devices. In one of the game's paralogs, Ephraim says this line, "I'll warn you now, the family bond between us is forged from the strongest steel. Ours is so strong that some fools dare to spread lies about us. Disgusting." The word disgusting has probably been plastered all around this video by now. I don't know, I haven't finished editing it. While not the most challenging, visually amazing, or unique game in the series, Fire Emblem The Sacred Stone still has a firm place in my heart. It was one of the first games I ever played in the series, and its greatness is not lost on me. I'd really like to see a game set in Magville in the future. Sacred Stones is the only game in the Fire Emblem series that doesn't have a follow-up, and that's a shame. Intelligent Systems, please bring back Magville.